Welcome to Everything Comes Together. My name is Srinag. I'm an architectural photographer based in Chennai, India. My guest today is potter and product designer Anumita Jain of A Clay Story. On Everything Comes Together, I'll be speaking with people in the broader photography, architecture, and design communities. Rather than only talking about their work, we will be talking about them, their personal journey, the challenges they overcame, and the most pivotal incidents in their lives that made them who they are today. So now, let's get to it. I have followed Anumita's work ever since she decided to go full-time with her brand, A Clay Story. Her tableware has always caught my eye because it seemed obvious to me that each piece was unique and was made with love for the work. If I was to buy one of her mugs or planters, I would feel like it was made individually for me. This stems from the fact that Anumita makes every single piece that A Clay Story sells. We talk about the challenges and joys of running a business solo, the years of learning that go into building expertise, and the importance of surrounding yourself with the people who can help move you ahead.
I actually grew up in Madhya Pradesh, and because of my father's job, we used to move every 2 years, 1.5, 2 years, which ended up in me changing almost 9 schools and multiple cities. So naturally, I was a very introverted, shy kid. I used to not make friends easily. So my mother started putting me every place we used to go to every summer. She used to put me in a different class. So that ranged from like a Kathak class to Bharatnatyam to piano lessons to then a lot of drawing and creative activities like glass painting, charcoal drawing, calligraphy. And that sort of just stayed with me throughout because that's one side that I enjoyed the most. And then, of course, she also noticed that interest. So she also started finding more classes similar to that. So every summer was something different. Meanwhile, at home also, any free time that I got, I used to do something creative. I used to collect all the broken bulbs and things that were meant to be thrown away, and I would just repurpose them and make something for my room or for the house. Just sort of stayed with me throughout the life. Yeah.
And so, at this point, I assume you also got some sort of introduction to pottery?
So pottery, not so much as what I know it today. But I do remember one incident when I was 12 years old, and we had this mela in our city where my mother had gone, and she saw this traditional potter with his wheel and giving a demo. And I remember she called me up and she said, you need to come here, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And I went there and I just stood there watching him work for a very long time. I obviously didn't try at that time, but I just was really fascinated at how his hands molded clay. And that stayed with me, but somehow I just never thought that that's something I could learn or pursue because, again, we had this image that it's like a traditional potter thing. We didn't have a concept of studio pottery back then. And again, because I was living in a small town, we didn't have that much exposure as well. So it was not till after college that I knew about studio pottery actually.
And did you ever, so I assume in college you would have had a more formal education in design, but did you have much exposure to a formal education of any kind? I know you went to classes, but did you have like teachers who helped you along the way?
So when I was in 10th standard, my mother found out about this exam called the Intermediate Drawing Exam, which was conducted by the JJ School of Arts. And it was like a 6-paper exam where you had multiple subjects, like still life, composition drawing, memory drawing, all of that. And she thought that I'd be interested in it, and she showed me what it is. And then we found some classes in Bhopal as well, and where the teacher used to train students for that exam. So I started taking those classes, and I gave my exam in 10th standard itself, and I got an A grade, which back then I was told is a big deal and not many people got an A grade. So from that and the people I met during those classes, I realized that there's this world of design which colleges like NIFT, NID, Srishti, all of those exist. And that's something that I can appear for. So when 11th standard came and I was a good student, so I did take science because I was interested in science. I could not study history, geography, and all of those subjects were not my cup of tea. Everyone expected me to do engineering, all my teachers. I think to some extent my father also wanted me to be an engineer because he himself is an IIT topper. So he wanted me to at least appear for the engineering exams, but I had made up my mind that I want to give design a shot, and those colleges basically prepared for the entrances for those colleges. So 11th, 12th, I started preparing for that, and all the college entrances actually start even before your pre-boards happen in 12th standard. So even before my boards, I actually had results for some of the colleges, which was a pretty great boost that time.
Yeah. So you've done a very varied. You've had a lot of creative endeavors almost when you were growing up, right? Did you have an idea of exactly what you wanted to do when you were younger?
Actually, I didn't. I just knew what I don't want to do. So, like, I am very scared of blood. So I knew that going into like studying biology, becoming a doctor, things like that just were a no-no for me. And honestly, when you're growing up, you're only given two options, which is either you do MBBS or you take up science and become an engineer and go to IIT and colleges like that. That's the kind of venue that I had in front of me. Those are the kind of subjects and the colleges that my friends were preparing for. So that's actually the only thing I knew. And 10th is when, due to these classes, I found out about design and then started looking into that. And I thought, okay, this is something that I can pursue because I know the other two options given to me are a no-no for me. So that's how it happened.
Okay. So coming back to what you were saying before, now you move into college, right? When you move to college, you move to Delhi.
Yeah.
Yeah. So could you just tell me about how that worked out?
So back then, NIFT I think had only about 8 or 9 centers. This is in 2010. And Delhi was one of the best centers. And the department that I was looking for, the department that I wanted to enter, my two choices were Delhi and Bangalore. And you're given your center and a department according to your rank. So there's a whole counseling session where you give your choices and you get it according to the rank. So I was very lucky that I got the department of my choice in Delhi. So I had been coming to Delhi every summer vacation because my grandparents and my father's side of the family stayed in Delhi. But I just never explored the city on my own because summer vacations are mostly just you're at home playing with your cousins. And I was also, before I came and I was told things like NIFT is not a good place. No one's friend. People steal ideas. You have to just keep to yourself and do your work and all of that. Plus also, I think for anyone coming from a small city, Delhi is a little scary. So I had all of that in mind. But I think just the fact that everyone around me was new to the city and new to this college just made it easier. I had already gone to changing my school every 2 years, so I knew what it felt like to be in a new institute. But I think, just adjusting to life became easier because everyone was new and everyone was just figuring their way out together.
Yeah. And I assume that the warnings about NIFT proved unfounded.
Yeah. So touch wood, I didn't have any bad experience. I found a very good peer group. We learned a lot from each other. We used to experiment together. We used to come up with things that we wanted to try and go to the lab and try it out. And in fact, even now, some of my peer group and my friends are sort of my biggest sounding boards and critiques. So anytime I need an opinion, I ask them and they do the same. So it's a very good system that we have and a very good, strong friend circle, I'd say.
Yeah, I really believe that that when you go and study in any college, it's not really what the college teaches you, but it's more like what you are able to pick up from your classmates and your friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, and also NIFT has a pretty a wider range of courses than I expected, because I didn't expect your particular course to be a part of an institute of fashion technology.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the biggest misconception. People just assume that because you're from NIFT, you're a fashion designer and you make garments. But actually, my course was a product design course, and we explored a lot of hard materials like wood and acrylics and metal. And our primary focus was interior products, which range from furniture, lighting fixtures to tableware. We also had people who were doing jewelry and footwear and bags in our department. So those were the electives that you could take. And we also had some basic interior projects that were happening. That was like the broader spectrum that we covered in my course.
Could you just talk about your internships while you were at NIFT?
Yeah, so in college it was mandatory for us to intern every year, and second year onwards is when we start working in our department. So for my second year internship, I thought I wanted to be an interior designer because I really loved doing up spaces. And so I found an internship in Gurgaon and worked with an interior designer for 2 months. During those 2 months, every day from 10 to 7, I would just be sitting in front of my laptop and working on AutoCAD. So that's when I realized that this is not a life that I want, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But like I said, ever since I was little, I knew what I don't want. And one of those things were that I didn't want to spend my life in front of a laptop. So I used to tell this to everyone in the office also, and they used to make fun of me, saying that, if you want to be in this field, this is how the work is, and this is what you'll end up doing. And I used to say that if nothing else, I will start painting and I will become a painter, but I'm not going to sit in front of a laptop. So that happened, but I genuinely didn't enjoy the work so much. I probably wasn't the right fit for me. I didn't feel it was creative enough. So then I started exploring products, because tableware is again a category that I really enjoyed. After that, we worked a lot with, we had like craft cluster projects. So we worked with artisans. We worked with the black pottery of Manipur. We went to Hoshiarpur and stayed for a couple of weeks and worked with the artisans there. So again, like I knew that tabletop is one category I enjoy. For my final graduation project, when we had to do a 6-month internship, I remember I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said that why don't we look for an internship in ceramics? And I was like, yeah, I mean, like, why haven't I thought of it? So we both started just, researching and finding out the companies that work in ceramics, the artists that work in ceramics, and both of us were very hands-on. And this is something that I learned in those 4 years in college, that I'm very hands-on and I enjoy being in the lab more than just sitting in the classes and sketching and doing the design part. I actually enjoyed making those designs come to life. So we started looking and we spoke to a lot of artists, but all of them said that they would require an intern who has some hand skills, and we weren't taught anything about ceramics in college at that point. So naturally, we didn't have any hand skills. Then we went to an export fair with college. I mean, it was a part of our college curriculum. And we saw one stand which had these beautiful ceramic pieces and beautiful paper mache pieces, amazing finishes. And we just spoke to them if they'd take interns, and we took their card. And we wrote to them, like we came back, we wrote to them, sent in our portfolios, and we bagged an internship there. It was a company based in Jaipur, and it was in fact the biggest ceramic exporter in India.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and they had these massive factories, like 9 factories, one for wood, one for pottery, one for paper mache. For pottery also, they had a stoneware and a terracotta factory separate. So it was pretty fascinating for us, and we used to just go mad experimenting in the factory, because we had so much access to clay and glazes and materials, and we could do anything that we wanted. So the next 4-5 months in the company, we obviously were given design briefs, and we were supposed to design those products for them. But
Yeah.
apart from that, we got a lot of time where we just spent time in the factory talking to the workers, trying something or the other, just experimenting with the material. And as soon as the internship got over, I was very clear in my mind that I just want to take up a pottery class. No job, nothing. I just want to start learning pottery and see where this can go. So, well, that happened. We made our college graduating collections, our graduation project, like our jury happened. There was a grad show that happened at the end of the 4 years. All of that happened. Uh, and then, of course, there was placements and all that were happening. And I did get a job in Jaipur.
Okay.
But I felt like after like a month, I was like, I don't think I want to take a job.
But was this job from the same place where you interned?
No, not
Okay.
from the same place. It was another company in Jaipur
Okay.
that had offered us a job. But it didn't work out, and I'm very glad it didn't, because then I ended up looking up for classes and artists. So again, I started writing to multiple artists and see if they teach. I wanted something where I could go and learn every day, but I
Yeah.
couldn't find anything like that. So I think in August 2014, I enrolled myself in Delhi Blue Pottery, which was a
Okay.
twice a week class. And so I used to go there. I think it was a Thursday, Friday batch that I was in, and 3 hours a day. And pottery is just, and that's when I realized that pottery is a very time-taking process. Like, it's a very slow process when you start. But luckily, when I was looking for classes, I remember when I'd gone to meet the instructors at Delhi Blue, the instructor there, she told me that, if you want to do pottery, just keep in mind that for the first 1 year, you will not be able to make anything. And in my
Okay.
head, I thought, I made something in that factory, I think I can manage. I, of course, did not have any experience with the wheel, but I thought I can do other methods and I can work with clay. But I think her advice later on, I realized, was so important, because I never hurried myself into learning something or making something. I let the craft take its time, which I think
I
was
think
very
that's
important.
really good for, even if it's not just someone who's working with pottery, but people who are in photography, people who are in design, or in general even painting. You don't get right to doing high quality work straight away. It takes time to build up to that.
Absolutely. And I think just that advice also just helped me not care about the returns. So, I was just enjoying the process. I was just focusing on my craft. I didn't care about firing my pieces. That's one thing that I see anytime people start learning pottery, they want to fire the first piece they make, no matter how
Yeah.
or what it is. But I think that never happened with me. And you won't believe, I used to make like multiple pieces every day, and I used to break and recycle everything,
Okay.
because I was like, I'm not good enough yet. And that's just that thing was set in my mind. And now this is something that I tell anyone who wants to start, and this is for every craft. I believe that for the first 1 year, you should just you should just focus on learning the craft and not
Yeah.
care about the returns and how much money you will make of it or what will be the future of it. I think you should
Yeah.
just enjoy it.
And also, speaking of the money that you make, now after you finish college, you're doing classes twice a week, right? And does this mean you didn't have a job at that time?
Yeah, so I consciously took this decision of not taking a job. But in a few months, what happened was that all my friends around me were either applying for masters or they were doing some job.
Okay.
And initially it didn't matter to me, but eventually it starts hitting you that you're not doing anything. And also, I think a major reason was that I couldn't see a proper progress in my pottery as well. So
Yeah.
when you start pottery, you are just made to make clay and make cylinders for the first few months. And it's not a linear process. So it's not like if today I've made a 6-inch cylinder, I'll be able to make
Yeah.
it tomorrow as well. Tomorrow I
Yeah.
might just not be able to make a 4-inch also. that started playing in my head. And I remember once a friend of mine told me that if you don't take up a job now, if you wait till the next year, you will be competing with the fresh batch. And then why would anyone take you over a fresh graduate, because you don't have any experience? And I
Yeah.
thought he's right. And all of that just started playing with my head. And no one actually, like at home also, no one really forced me. I did take up one or two branding projects, but obviously nothing concrete. So I thought maybe I'm wasting my life and I should take up a job. That's when another friend of mine suggested. He told me about an opening at a job at a company in Noida,
Okay.
and so I spoke to them. I contacted them. I sent in my portfolio, interviewed with them. This was December 2014. I got a call back saying that they really like my work and they would like me to join, but the joining will be in February. So
Okay.
I thought fine, I'll wait for it. I mean, not that I have anything else to do. And I told them about my pottery classes, and I told them that I'll be able to work 5 days a week because Saturday and Sunday is when I have my pottery class, and this is something I don't want to give up. They were okay. Luckily it was a 5 day a week company. Uh, so anyway, by the time I was waiting for their opening in Feb, sometime mid Jan, end Jan, I think I just started losing my mind. Everyone's working, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
And I read
Yeah.
about this place called Andretta in Himachal. And
Right. Okay.
yeah, and it's a very small town. It's about an hour from Dharamshala, and there's a pottery place there. It's a pottery institute. And I
Okay.
read about it, and they had a 3 month course where you can stay there for 3 months, and they teach you pottery. And
Okay.
immediately I called them without thinking. I just called them and I just discussed the whole process of applying and how it is and what it is. And
Yeah.
I applied for it. I spoke to my parents, and I obviously had no money. So I was like, you have to pay for it. But I really, really want to do this course, and I think it will be good for me.
Yeah.
Uh, so April is when I was starting the course. February, I told that company that I won't be able to join you right now. April, I went for it, and when I went, again, I had two things very clear in my mind, that
Yeah.
those 3 months are for me to see, for me to develop my skill, A, and B, for me to see if I can do pottery from 9 to 5 every day without getting bored, without getting tired. Because it's
Yeah.
one thing to imagine doing it, and it's completely different to actually do it
Actually.
every day. Yeah. So again, after 2 3 weeks there, taught us the basics, and then we used to sort of, because everyone is at a different stage
Yes.
in pottery, right? So someone can make cylinders, someone can make bowls, someone can make plates. So after we were done with the basics, every day I used to set a target for myself, and that could be make 20 bowls, make 25 bowls, whatever. And I used to make them in
Yeah.
the morning. After lunch, I used to trim them, and after that, I used to break everything, recycle that clay, and prepare it for the next day. So when we were in Andretta, after a couple of weeks, because it's not a linear process for everyone, and everyone was at a different stage of making, I started giving myself these tasks for every day, where I would make, let's say, 20 bowls, and then trim them, and then break them, recycle them, and prepare the clay for the next day. Because I knew that I don't want to carry a bag full of things back with me when I finish the course. I just wanted to get my skill right. So when I'm back home, I can start making things and then actually start pursuing it properly. And I remember that after 3 months, I came back home with only two pieces and like a couple of few small testers that I still have.
Okay.
So those 3 months were a lot of learning. It was a lot of fun. It was a batch of 8 students, and we were all from different parts of the world, of the country. But it was a lot of fun. And so the instructor there is Mansimran Singh, and he's actually the son of Sardar Guru Charan Singh, who was the pioneer of studio pottery in India.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and he started Delhi Blue Pottery Trust when there was no studio pottery here. So now his son, who's himself about 80 years, he handles and teaches pottery there. And the Delhi Blue Pottery in Delhi is also a part of the same trust.
And do you have examples of some of the things that you have made?
Yeah, I actually have. So So we used to work in terracotta there. So this
Okay.
is an experiment that we all did together. This is a bottle that I made, black stain on it. So you can see it's this reddish color because it's terracotta.
Okay.
And then I made these small little vases because I used to love testing glazes on this. So during our glaze course, we wanted something to test the colors. These small bottles, which I still have. So yeah. So that's
Very
all.
cool.
That's all I got.
That's all you brought back with you, is it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So, what did you do after you came back to Delhi then?
So, while I was there, sometime in July, I got a call from the same company I had interviewed with in December, and
Okay.
they had an urgent opening. But I told them that I'm not in Delhi for the next 2 months, so I wasn't looking at a job right at that point. Meanwhile, also I spoke to someone who had a studio in Pune, and I spoke to them about an internship with them. So September is when I was supposed to join them for a month-long internship because my thought at that was that now I've learned the craft, I've seen how to make things, but how to run a studio is completely different, right? So my idea was to go and see how their studio is, what all you need, how they run a studio, how they sell their stuff. So just to get an idea and an experience for that, I spoke to them, and September I was set to go and join them. Meanwhile, when I went back in August, I got a call from a company who had seen my portfolio through the company I interviewed with, and they
Okay.
wanted me to join them. At that point, I told them on the phone that I'm not looking for a job, and I'm doing pottery, and I have to travel for it in another 2 months, so I didn't want to commit for a job. And they told
Okay.
me that just come and meet us, discuss this project, and just come and have a casual interview, and then we'll see how it goes. So I just thought, what harm could it be? So I went to meet them, and then they told me we discussed what the project was, and they liked my work. So they said that just join us for 2 months, work on these collections for us, and then you're free to do whatever you want.
Oh, very nice. So, really accommodating.
Yeah. So, and it was interesting because up till then, I had done no work in design. So I thought it could be a good experience. I would also earn some money. It would also sort of help the guilt of not doing anything. So I took it up. Yeah. So I took it up and I started going there every day. And I think in about 2 to 3 weeks, one of the bosses, he came and told me that he just started having this chat about what this pottery is and where I'm going and what I want to do. And he said that when you're back from Pune from that internship, November, December, whatever it is, he wanted me to join back. And he said, you can keep continuing your own work. You can work like 4 days a week with us, and the 2-3 days that you have your pottery class, you can continue with that, but we want to retain you for a long time. And it was a big
Okay.
deal. And I also sort of liked the environment of the company, and I started enjoying that work as well. So I
Yeah.
agreed to it. So December 2015 is when I came back to Delhi, and I started working with them. And I was also doing a pottery on the side. And I went back
Okay.
to Delhi pottery, thinking that I'm not ready to open my studio yet. So I went back to them saying that, I want to enroll in the classes again. But they
Okay.
didn't have spots. And they said, usually when you go there, there's a 2-3 month waiting, and that's pretty normal. So I was like, okay, meanwhile, let me just get some clay and start doing something at home at least, because it's better than not completely losing touch. So I started working at
Sure.
home. I started making small pieces. And then I used to take them back to Delhi to pottery to fire. Meanwhile, they didn't have any opening. And so I started looking at alternatives.
So, when you started making them at home, that means that by this point you already got yourself a wheel.
Oh, yes. So I actually got myself a wheel long back. So I met this artist. I wanted to learn with him, but the dates didn't work out. But he suggested, and again, this is one piece of advice that I think I hold close to my heart. He told me that if you want to take this up properly, you need to buy a wheel because twice a week classes won't help you. This is before Andretta.
Okay.
So and that's when I remember my phone was almost 3 years old and it was on the verge of breaking. And I was like, I don't want to buy a new phone, please. I told my parents, buy me a wheel. So I bought a wheel that back then. But I never used it because I wasn't able to center at home. I wasn't able to make anything at that point. So when I came back from Andretta, I started buying clay in small quantities and then making a few pieces here and there. But again, I had no firing outlet. It was a very once in a while thing. I would sit on the wheel for a little bit, 1 hour, 2 hours a week and do something. Then I started looking at alternatives. So I found about this community studio in Delhi itself, where you could go and you pay a monthly fee where you can work and there's a kiln there that you can rent. So I started working there and I booked. So, I just said that I need a kiln booking and I got a date for April. So now I had some motivation to make items for that, to fill the kiln.
Okay.
So I started at home also along with my job. I started working there as well. And I made like a bunch of bowls and mugs and cups to be fired. So I did that in April. That was my first independent firing. And I still have those mugs and cups that my parents use at home actually. And bowls also. Some of them didn't turn out right because the kiln overfired on some shells and underfired on some. It was a very kiln which was, I think they needed to repair it, but they didn't. So, but that gave me the confidence that, I can again fill up an entire kiln and fire it myself.
Yeah.
So, and then I had all this time in the world that time in April. So I started shooting them and I also started putting them on Instagram a little bit. And I think I did like a little, so a friend of mine was doing a market that time, like an exhibition of sorts for students who are interested in design colleges because they used to run a coaching institute. So I displayed a couple of my stuff there. So I think I must have sold like a few pieces, but it was more for the students to understand what all possibilities are there. But just to like a first showcase of my products. Then I think in June again I asked them that can I get a kiln booking, and they said the next date was in December.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and I was like, wow, that's crazy because if I keep waiting for 4 months, I will never be able to take this up seriously or even consider selling it. But I was still like, Chalo, I mean, let's see how this goes. Meanwhile, I started concentrating on my social media and I started posting regularly. And I had this stylist who approached me and bought one of my bowls. And she was it was Deepa Rajpal, passionate about baking. And she had a very following and she was a very sweet person. So she bought my bowls and she posted them immediately. And I got a lot of queries. Suddenly, a lot of people started asking me. And so that's when I realized that there is scope here. And if I take this if I do my social media seriously, and if I start posting regularly, making regularly, this is how I can reach out to a wider audience and sell my stuff.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I obviously I had some stock from my first firing. I sold a couple of those pieces. But again, this waiting for 4 months was a big deal. So my parents started telling me that, I should start considering buying a kiln. That's a huge investment and I wasn't ready for it. Also because around me, I had seen a lot of potters who had been working in this for 8 years, 10 years, and none of them owned a kiln. So I thought that it would be very foolish on my part to suddenly in 1 year go and make such a big capital investment, whereas people who've been working for 8, 9 years haven't. So, and clearly there's a reason for that. So I was like, I'm not ready for it. And that's when my father sat me down and explained me that this is how a business works. You need to invest in it to be able to grow. And this is a business investment and companies run in losses for years. So not that big a deal. This is something, if you're serious, you want to do this, then you have to do it properly and then you have to buy a kiln.
Yes.
That really
Yes.
gave me a boost. So I started talking to, again, my instructor at Delhi Blue Pottery. I went to him and I said, I'm considering this. And he made the kiln for me, actually, eventually.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I discussed, this is how my house is. This is the balcony. This is the amount of space I have. I measured the entry door, the lift, and everything. And because I'm in an apartment, it was a fourth floor. So, all of those technical details I discussed with him and I asked him, is it possible for me to keep a kiln in the house? And he said, it's possible and I'll make a kiln which will fit your requirement. But I was still very hesitant. I was like, it's a big financial investment and I don't think I want to do this. But my parents kept pushing me. I had a similar conversation with my boss at that point, where he again told me the same thing that, if you want to do this seriously, it's a business investment and you have to make it to be able to grow. So by December 2016, I booked my kiln in November and I got it in December. And at that point, and even after that, I told myself that whatever I'm earning from the company that I'm working for, that will all go into my savings, because eventually I knew I will quit my job and do pottery full time, and it would be very foolish of me to just imagine that the day I start doing it full time I'll get orders, right?
Yeah.
So I thought
Yeah.
that whatever I'm earning will either be my travel money or will be my savings.
Okay.
And that's what will help me when I'm doing clay story full time.
And
what
this,
Your boss knew that you were going to start your own business eventually.
Yeah. So I was doing
Okay.
pottery alongside the job anyway. So he knew about it. He used to discuss it with me. He used to give me a lot of business tips. He used to
okay.
always, he still tells me that I should get into exports because that's where the money is. So that way, it was very encouraging for someone who's run his business for 30 years to get that sort of insight. Uh, Tips about packing a breakable material, because again, we used to ship overseas. So that was a
Yeah.
very good experience in terms of my job as well.
And may I know which company this is that you work at?
Yeah, so this was called Ferrolinkers, and it's an
Okay.
export house, and we used to make metal home decor, and we used to make a lot of metal mirrors. So that's where the packaging aspect of packaging a mirror and ceramic was very similar. So I learned a lot in the factory also. Another great thing about the job was that we used to have all the international clients. So I got a great exposure to what's happening in terms of design in Europe, in America, in Australia. And I used to directly deal with those clients and those buyers. So we used to have these design meetings where they would fly in and we would all sit and design together. And they would send in their trend reports and I would design according to that and then develop those samples for that. So just in terms of exposure to design as well, that was a very good opportunity for me. And I was the only designer. So when I joined, I was very, very nervous as to how I will handle so much. But because I was the only one, I had to learn every aspect of that. And I think, and my boss was also, he was very fond of me. So he would make me do things like costing. So every time he would cost, he would make me sit next to him. So I would cost things with him and I understood all of that as well. I would understand packaging, shipping, all those nitty-gritties for running a business. So I think that was a very good experience.
Definitely. You got practical business experience without needing to go to business school.
Absolutely.
And before you started your own business.
Because at home, we had no environment of business. Like no one in my extended family owns or runs a business or works in a business company. I mean, owns a business, sorry. So, and they always say that, you're the first entrepreneur of the house. And I've never seen that. And even my dad, I remember, even before pottery, he once told me that when I said I wanted to be an artist and I don't want to do design and take up a job, and he used to tell me that I have no doubt that whatever you make will be very nice, but I don't think you'll be able to sell it because you don't have that networking, selling side in you. So, and he wasn't wrong because it did take a long time to develop and it's still developing, I feel. But yeah.
So speaking of gaining business experience at Ferrolinkers, I think this is also when you and your friends start your first business.
Yes. So this was, I think, 2016, December 2017, Jan. Two of my friends and I, we were just sitting one day, and both of them had their own ventures. One was working with textiles, and one was making furniture. So we thought that we could all club it together and take like a space where we could display our own products, and it could also become like an office space for us where we could have meetings and get clients and all of that. So, and both of them also had a full-time job along with it. So we rented this small place in Haskas village, and we called it the Studio SQ1. SQ1 because it was the room, the address where we all stayed in college, and even at that time. So it was called Studio SQ1. And we had a good mix of furniture, ceramic, textiles in that store. We launched it, I think, in June 2017. June 2017 is also when we were the finalists for the Interior Lifestyle Award. So that's where we actually launched the studio. And then a week later, we had an opening for our store.
So you won an award as soon as you started, or you were finalists for the award as soon as you started?
Yeah. So you could send in your design. So we had sent in a lighting design, a lamp design that we had. That put us to that platform. And because we were all designing separately in our own ventures anyway, right? So June is when we launched the store. Meanwhile, I was also working with Ferrolinkers. That's when I also started filing in my own kiln and making work regularly. So eventually, I think towards the end of 2017, things started getting a little hectic because work at Ferrolinkers picked up a lot, and I was almost going 5 to 6 days a week. I was going to the factory, which was 3 hours one way. So I was traveling almost 6 hours every day. I was coming back home and doing pottery at night, or maybe, on Sundays. Saturday, Sunday, if I used to get time, I used to go and spend it at the store, just managing the store and doing some work for that.
Oh, wow.
So it's really, really hectic. And I think just the travel was also really ruining it for me because 6 hours of traveling was too much. So I started talking to my bosses about eventually, I do want to quit. And I spoke to them about it in 2018. And I said, after this fair, I would like to just discontinue. And they were like, we can't let you go that easily. Move on. So we started looking for replacements, or basically hiring junior designers who then I could train and then I can move on. So 2018, again, things got hectic. But I found one person who then joined us full time. I started training him. Meanwhile, my personal social media following started increasing. I started getting more orders. So I had this weird phase where I had work and all I wanted to do was go back home and just do pottery. But I couldn't because I had to be at the factory. I had to do 10 other things. And I felt like I am missing out on the one thing that I really, truly love and I wanted to do. So again, by the end of 2018, I started pushing my bosses that, I don't think I can stay any longer. So just please figure this out. By the end of 2018, our store also started facing a little problems. Like it was a basement, so we started having some flooding and pipeline issue and all of that. So reconstructing that also meant a lot of a big financial investment. So then we sat as a team and we just discussed about how we want to take this forward. And I had realized that all three of us had different goals for our own brands. And it didn't make sense to continue that space. So December 2018, Jan 2019 is when we shut the doors to that space as well. Yeah. And by that time, the junior designer at Ferrolinkers that I hired had been there for about 6 to 8 months. So I told my bosses that after this fair, the fair is when in basically Feb March is our fair and meeting time. So all our buyers come in that time. So I told them that after this phase is over, I would like to discontinue completely. After that also they told me that we want to retain you, so maybe just stay on as a consultant. You don't have to come every day, you don't have to do the day-to-day workings of the factory. Just come once in a while when there's a meeting, just design for us and keep guiding the design team from home. So that was the arrangement I made with them. April is when I officially quit Ferrolinkers. May is when a clay story was featured in Vogue. So I think yeah, I
Okay.
think that it was a very good boost also for me, because to quit something, also having a financial, it's stable income that's coming in. So to quit that, to venture on to something which you don't know how it will go. So just to get featured in a magazine like Vogue also meant a lot. And I was one of the 5 ceramic artists who were featured. So that was pretty interesting. But then I went on and I traveled for a couple of months. I went and attended a glaze course. Then I went to Bangalore to conduct a course at a pottery studio there.
Okay.
Then I traveled for a bit. So for 2-3 months I was away. And then I came
Yeah.
back to Delhi in July 2019. And
Okay.
since
So
I need to interrupt you here just for one thing. So actually, the Vogue feature was the first time I came across you as well.
oh,
So that's when I first saw a clay story, because I saw it online. This was about a year and a half ago, you said, right? And then after that, I think, so now that you had gone to Bangalore to teach a workshop. So how do you manage to work there? Do you take your own equipment with you, or do you work on the equipment that they provide?
So basically, again in 2018, when I was telling my bosses I want to quit and I can't do this anymore, they told me that I can take 2 months off and do
Okay.
whatever I want, like completely off, and then come back and join with a fresh mind.
Okay.
So that's the first time I actually conducted a workshop in Himachal. And I
Okay.
spoke, so it was a collaboration between a studio that already existed there. So they had an entire setup. And we went there, stayed for a week, and did like a beginner's workshop where we had like 5 to 6 participants. It was a small space only, so we couldn't accommodate a lot.
Yeah.
So that was the first time, and it also was a good escape for me from Delhi heat. So it felt like a good idea to just maybe do 1 or 2 workshops every year in a space where the setup already exists. In
Yeah.
2019, I was approached by this pottery studio in Bangalore called the Slow Pottery.
Okay.
They do this professional course, which was a 6-month long course. And
Okay.
there they teach everything from the basics of throwing to glazing to basically your portfolio building, everything in those 6 months. So as
Okay.
a part of that, I went there for 10 days to conduct design and pottery and form generation and coming up with your own ideas. Because
Right.
mostly when you go to a pottery class, they teach you throwing, and often I've seen students just end up looking at Pinterest for ideas and recreating that. So our idea was to break away from that and teach students how they can make their own products. So a little bit of that. So the whole equipment, studio setup, everything was already there. I just had to go and teach.
So, getting back to what you were saying, that you had just started Clay Story, and soon after that, you were featured in Vogue. That must have brought you a lot of attention. And so, how did you actually continue to grow from mid 2019?
So 2019 again, once I had now my full focus was on pottery, I decided that I also need to, apart from growing my social media presence, I also need to grow my offline presence. So I started doing these markets where it's like an exhibition and some 10, 20 brands present their work and it's you sell it. So I did
Yeah.
my first market in July in Delhi. Then we also have an annual Potters market every year in Delhi and in a couple of other states as well. So I participated in that, and I did one in Bhopal as well. So I did 3 markets in 2019, and
Okay.
that also gave me a lot of offline clientele and increased my following, and people placed orders through those markets as well. Another reason for doing a market was also because I felt that something like ceramic needs to be felt and touched and seen before buying it. And I think nothing can replace that tactile feeling of a product. It really helped me because a lot of my bigger orders, like dinner sets and bigger sets, came through those markets at that point. Online orders would be smaller ones, or people who are into food styling and photography would place an order for their props. It was mostly like that till that point. Yeah. 2019 was also the first time when I had time during Diwali, so I could tap into the festive market. So I made these candle gift boxes. And initially, I thought I'll just make like 20 boxes and that's it. And I put them up on a pre-order basis, and I ended up getting thrice the amount more than thrice the amount I'd initially planned.
Wow.
So I did.
That's your own gift for Diwali then.
Yeah. So basically, I just learned how this pre-order works, and I just tried and tested a couple of things to see what works and what doesn't. So I did like a small candle gift box thing for Diwali, and then I repeated it in Christmas because a lot of people were asking for it. But yeah, so 2019 I would say was a lot of trial for me. If offline markets work for me or not, pre-order works for me or not. So I just tried everything I could think of. Then again, 2020 in the beginning, I did, I think, one market before the lockdown. And so I had some orders from that also. And then, of course, March is when the lockdown happened. For 2 months, almost everything was shut. I wasn't firing also because, cylinders, and I just didn't want people to get cylinders, people to come over. So 2 months much work didn't happen. But May and in June, when the lockdown started opening, suddenly I put it out saying that, I'm open for orders now. And suddenly there was a surge of orders, which is pretty unexpected. And it was a lot of smaller orders, but a lot of them. So I think and there was a lot of backlog from the last 2 months of the lockdown as well. So July is when I realized I need to rethink my entire sales structure and model. So I shut my orders, and I said that, I'm going to just make a batch of things which I know sell well, and I'm going to put them up as a shop update. And the only things I'll make on order will be like dinner sets, because there are usually larger sets, and I don't have that much stock at any point. So that is something that I will make on orders. And it also gives me and the client the flexibility to be able to customize a little bit in terms of the products that they want and the sizes they want. So then I made like a little newsletter thing, and I had a mailing list, and I emailed it to them saying that, orders are stopped, dinner sets can be made on order. And then suddenly there was so much interest in those dinner sets. And I think one of the reasons was also because I did like a shoot where I laid a table setting and I put all of the products together. And suddenly people could imagine how it would look in their houses. Right. And suddenly there was a surge, and so many people wanted dinner sets. And this is the first time bigger orders started coming to me online as well.
Okay. What I notice is that somehow you know exactly how to tap into what interests the market. So first you stay online with social media, and then you need to expand by going offline to bring in a new type of customer. And then after doing fairs and offline, you're also figuring out how to do like direct mailing to bring in little more attention. And then so suddenly the larger orders are now coming from online also. Yeah. Where did you pick up on tapping into the market in the right way? Did you have any friends helping you, or was it that your time at Ferrolinkers that helped you? Or was it just something that came naturally to you?
So it was a lot of experimenting on my part, because I just feel like if I'm doing something, I have nothing to lose. I can just try. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But at the same time, I did consciously make an effort on my social media. So I would go and see a lot of other pages who are doing maybe similar work, or other designers, or even like stylists. Just see how they interact with their audience, how they work, how they promote themselves without actually sounding too salesy. Because
Yeah.
you don't, like, if you go and read my captions as well, there's none of my captions will have a DM for price, or
Right.
DM to order. I never write all of that, but it's
Yeah.
always about storytelling. So I'll give you a small example.
Sure.
For example, if you look at Coke, they're not saying that we are selling carbonated water, right? They
Yeah.
sell the whole idea of having a meal with your friends and enjoying that drink together. So they're selling happiness, something like that is their tagline. So
Yeah.
similarly, I realized that I don't have to sell pottery. I have to sell meal times. I have to sell a family sitting together, enjoying their meal on a dinner table, talking, discussing their day,
Yeah.
debating on topics. And that's what we used to do a lot. So every Saturday, we used to go to our grandparents' house who in Delhi, and
Yeah.
all my cousins and relatives would be there, and we would just spend hours sitting on the dinner table. So that was the whole idea. And food and ceramics go hand in hand. And they say food brings together, right? People together. Ceramic brings that food together. So that's how I started developing and thinking on who my target audience is, and what are they looking for, and what
Yeah.
should be my narrative as a seller, without saying that I make plates and please buy my plates. So
Yeah.
that's how I started thinking. But I did observe a lot of other artists, and I saw how they're working. And that's how the newsletter idea also came, because I saw a lot of these international artists always spoke about their newsletter and how you should sign up to get like exclusive updates. So in terms of marketing, I realized that social media can become big. So I started following accounts who worked in similar fields that I did, and also
Yeah.
other people also. Just started observing what they're doing. That's how I also realized that email marketing is a thing, and people actually collect email IDs, and that's where they convert their followers into their collectors. I started following a lot of international artists and just trying and understanding how they're engaging their audience. So there was a lot of trial and error, and one thing was that I just always wanted to be just authentic, and I was always very, very apprehensive talking to the camera, and but that's something that I try to do a little bit now with social media.
Yeah.
uh, and I was very clear that I never wanted to be too salesy. I didn't want to push my products. I didn't want to say this is available and DM me and all of that. But it just happened in the narrative that I was building through my page. So, and so far it has worked.
So you have people messaging you, asking you about your work, and then they get to see your a bit of the behind the scenes, right? Now, do you have people also talking to you? And then, what are the common misconceptions that people have about your work in pottery and ceramics?
So in terms of the actual pieces, it's really fascinating. But a lot of people ask me if they can use it, and they ask me things like if this will melt, if this can be washed, uh, and it's a general I think people just assume because it's some one person making it by hand and it's not made in the factory, they feel like it's not permanent or it's not going to be sturdy. I've had people ask me questions like, "Will the handle come off?" And things like that. So I mean, of course, it doesn't happen so much on my social media, because they see a lot of process that goes into it, and I talk a lot about products, and I also use them in my daily life, so they see that it's being used. But this question comes a lot when people visit from the outside and they see the products, and they always have this little doubt whether it's usable or not. That. Secondly, in terms of profession, a lot of people assume that it's my hobby and it's like a side thing that I'm doing. Either a side profession or just a hobby till, I figure out what I want to do. So that's very difficult to convince people.
I got that a lot with photography as well.
Yeah.
The common thing that I would get was, So I tell someone that I was a photographer, and they said, "What are you going to do next? Are you going to be a movie cameraman?" And I'm like, "That's not a natural progression to go from photography to a motion picture cameraman." Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still difficult to explain people what I'm doing, and people still assume, and a lot of people still tell me, that now I need to hire like 10 people and open a factory and do
Yeah.
things like that because that's the only way to grow.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for them to understand that why I want to sit and make every piece myself.
So I have two questions to ask you at this point. The first one is related to the misconceptions of your job. If you simply Google Indian potter or you Google pottery in India or anything like that, the images that comes up in Google is a man doing pottery in a village at a wheel, right? So is this something that is this one of the misconceptions that people ask you about, or is this something that doesn't really come into play at all?
So surprisingly, I haven't been asked this much, but pottery is a traditional practice that goes back ages, right? And hundreds of years. And traditionally, actually, in the villages, even today in India, women are not allowed to sit on the wheel. This is what I read somewhere. That it's mostly the men who do the wheel work, and it's the women who do all the decoration work on the pots. So technically, yes, that is the scenario. But this is not a question that I get a lot because again, I think
Okay.
it's also the environment that they see me in. The wheels are a little bit different. We use the electric wheel now in urban areas. The clay is also different. It's glazed stoneware.
Yeah.
So this particular thing hasn't come up so much in conversation. Literally, it is the men who used to work on the wheel.
Okay. So the next question that I had in mind, which was sort of touching upon what you talked about earlier, where you were talking about people telling you that you need to hire a lot of people and then set up almost like a production line of a factory, right? Um, how how many people right now work with you? Does anyone work with you, or are you like a one person operation?
So currently, I work alone. I've been I've been working alone for the last 4 years. Eventually, one of the major goals after shifting to a studio space was also to hire one help. And
Okay.
the reason for that is that pottery is a very physical work, and there's a lot of work that goes in every piece that doesn't really require me to be present or the creative aspect of it. So there's a lot of sanding and cleaning the pieces and waxing the pieces before
Yeah.
and after every process.
Yeah.
So, and also packing and all of that takes a long time. So the plan is to start with one person first, and then
Okay.
eventually, I mean, I'm not sure how I want to take it forward, but if let's say if I have to expand a team, I would actually try and get some of the traditional potters, because there are lots of these villages now. Where people don't do pottery anymore. They are traditionally potters, but they're not working anymore.
Okay.
Also, when you see terracotta, mostly they make these gamlas, which are planters, and diyas, especially during Diwali, right? So I think in future, in a few years, if I can take them, train them in stoneware, get them to make modern things, which they can also earn a lot more money than they do for their terracotta pieces. I think that is one aspect of my business that I would like to grow in, because I know that I don't want to get into the big mass manufacturing factory sort of a setup yet.
Yeah.
Because I've seen the factory running very, very closely at Ferrolinkas, and I've seen how much it takes you to run a factory. And I don't want to lose touch with my creative side of the business. So I
Sure.
don't know. It'll be very difficult to balance both if I go the factory way. If I can work with a small cluster and also hopefully help them benefit from it, that will be probably the way I would like to go forward. But that's a few years down the line. I mean, I've only
Right.
been doing this full time for 1.5 years. So I need to sort of settle this, streamline this, and then think of how to grow further.
Yeah, and it's all the more impressive, or it's really nice to hear that as you said, after just 1.5 years of doing this full time, that you have now been able to set up your own studio space. And that's also where you're sitting right now. And that's something that you did recently?
Yeah, so I've been in this space for 2 weeks. It's actually not completely done up yet.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
so there's still some work left. And again, when I quit in 2019, I knew that the next step is to move out of home and have a separate space, because it's also very dusty, very messy, requires space. And I kept referring back to the same conversation I had with my dad when I wanted the kiln, and when he said that it's a business investment that you have to do if you have to grow. So
Yeah.
you might think that you're spending more than you can, but it's all an investment, and which will fetch you more later on. So don't worry about that. Just take that leap of faith.
Yeah. That's some pretty great advice. So you said your dad and your parents had never been in business, right? What did they do?
So my dad's an IS officer. He's actually an engineer turned an IS officer, and my mother is a professor in health and nutrition. So yeah,
So neither of them do anything related to what you're doing.
so nothing related to any creative line. And my dad, in fact, doesn't even understand what I do. So even when I was in college, he used to keep saying that, I don't know what you do, so I can't really give you any advice. So whatever you're doing must be right.
But it's such a fantastic thing that they sort of didn't even try and nudge you in any direction, and you just went where you wanted to go. And that's proof positive that that method of doing it really works out, where you don't push the child into doing something.
Absolutely. But I also feel, because I get this a lot from like students who are either in 11th and 12th or are in college, and I get
Yeah.
these questions about how to convince their parents. And I feel that the best way to convince your parents is to work. So when I
Yeah.
said I wanted to do pottery, they saw me working hard for it. When I said I wanted to do design, they saw me working hard for it. So
Yeah.
there was never any question of doubting. Like I never said I want to do this and then sat around. I actually
Yeah.
worked job. There was no question of will you be able to earn money, because they saw that I had been working very hard, and they saw that I've built something that I can grow now. So
Yeah.
I think that's the only way you can convince your parents, by actually doing what you say.
That's one of the main reasons why I do this podcast. So when I would interact with students as well, I would get all the questions that I would get were more practical questions, not related to photography. It was more like, how do you start a business? How long does it take to set it up? How did you learn what to do? And when I had a chance to talk at a school, a lot of the questions were like exactly like what you said. How do you convince your parents to let you do what you want to do? So that's why talking to different people like this, like all of you, it would really help. Okay, so now you've obviously been working for 1.5 years for yourself. Now that you're on your own, do you have more free time than you did when you were doing 3 different things at a time?
So when I was still at the home studio, I
Yeah.
did, because I realized that my day was very flexible, and I would sometimes end up working at night. I would end up working on the weekends. With this
Yeah.
space, I think one of my major aim is also to leave at a certain time, keep my evenings free, maybe keep once a week free. Also right now, because like I was talking about, I'm in the process of shifting my sales strategy and figuring out what works, what doesn't. So there
Yeah.
is a little bit of and I also had orders booked till December back in August, so I'm trying to finish all of that and trying to see what's the best possible way to move forward. So there is a
Yeah.
bit of work, but ever since I've shifted here, I have been leaving here at 6 o'clock, not working at 10 and 11 at night, trying
Yeah.
to keep one day free. So I think now I've started to have more free time.
That's good to hear. So I think we're now coming up to the end of our conversation. But before we go, I really wanted to talk about you talked about it a little earlier, where you talked about working on different people's wheels, right? When you would go and teach workshops. Could you just talk a little bit about the equipment involved and also the clay? When we spoke earlier, you were telling me about different regions having different types of clay, right? Could you just talk a little bit about the equipment and the clay?
Yeah. So in terms of equipment, I think the most important thing that we all need is the potter's wheel. And most of the urban potters now have an electric wheel. Some still use kick wheel or a combination of both. Uh, Electric wheel, it's pretty much the same, but every time you're in a new environment, it does take a little bit of time for you to get used to that space. So, like we were talking about the time I was in Bangalore. So they had a completely different electric wheel from what I have. But in terms of that, I think it takes you about a few minutes to get used to that. The bigger challenge is when there's a change of clay. So
Yeah.
if it's a different composition, the plasticity of the clay can differ, which means how
Okay.
much I can play with it on the wheel is different. Like in Unret, I used to use terracotta, and terracotta is much easier to throw on the wheel. So I would be
Okay.
able to make taller things, bigger things much easily than I when I came back and I started working in stoneware. It took me a little sort of unlearning and relearning of sorts to get back to this clay and get used to this clay. Similarly, if I use porcelain, it's even harder to control on the wheel. Uh, it does play a little bit, it factors a little bit when you're working with different clays, but I think in one or two tries, you get a hang of it because the process eventually is the same. And
Okay.
of course, if now I go and sit on a traditional potter's wheel, that's going to be very difficult for me, or the one that they move with their hands. Something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that is very, very difficult. Uh, but if it's an electric wheel, you'll get used to it in a couple of minutes.
Okay. Okay. I think it's been a really interesting conversation. One thing I would like to say is I can't wait to come to your studio because looking at the shelves of pots and planters and mugs behind you, it really makes me want to come there and check it all out. And hopefully, you'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for doing this, and we'll talk more soon.
Sure. Thank you so much.
To watch this and other episodes of the show, please subscribe to Srinag Pictures on YouTube, or you can listen to the audio podcast by subscribing to Everything Comes Together on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or on the podcast app of your choice. The music for the show was composed by Ashray Harishankar from Escapist Music. Post-production by Thiruvikraman Srinivasa Raghavan of SNS Arts Development Consultancy, and production assistance by Abdul Jilani. You can reach me on Instagram at Srinag or from my website www.srinagpictures.com. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another fascinating guests who work in photography, architecture or design. Until we meet again, it's goodbye from Mylapore.